Welcome back, friends. I'm your host, Lisa Harding, and today I'm joined by a guest who found success in the clues and built a business out of a side hustle, Sara Marye. Sara is a former teacher who overcame imposter syndrome to get where she is today, CEO of the Stellar Teacher Company. Sara started her career as an elementary school teacher and has since built a thriving business supporting literacy instruction for educators across the country. In today's episode, we'll dig into how she made the pivot, the practical steps she took to get her business off the ground, and the mindset shifts that helped her go from teacher to full-time entrepreneur. This episode is also packed with truly inspiring tidbits that apply not just to teachers transitioning into entrepreneurship, but teachers making any big career transitions. From imposter syndrome, the importance of networking, building a mastermind to support you, and how momentum, or the lack thereof, could be the number one thing holding you back from building a life you love. Let's dive in.
I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom. I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Sara, so excited to have you here and so excited to talk to, I guess, a former stellar teacher turned professional stellar teacher. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. I am super excited to chat with you today.
So I brought Sara on because I love her entrepreneurial journey. Her website, I'm sure my listeners will check it out if they haven't already after the episode. A great business that she's built for herself. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your journey, Sara. Maybe talk to us, like, what were you doing in the classroom? What was your education journey like? And then parlay into where you are now.
Yeah, so I come from a long line of educators. My mom was a teacher, my grandma was a teacher, all my aunts are teachers. So it just sort of seemed natural that I would go into education. That's kind of, I feel like, sort of what I always envisioned myself pursuing. But I have always also been an impact chaser. So it's like when I became a teacher, I sort of knew from the beginning that I was not going to be one of those teachers who taught for 20, 30 years in the same school, in the same classroom. I feel like that's what a lot of my classmates sort of pursued in education. I was like, no, I want to make a big impact. Like, I want to see where this can take me. And so I started off teaching second grade and first grade for the first 4 years. And then I had an opportunity to become an instructional coach. So I took that and I left the classroom, and that was really cool because I now got to help a lot of teachers in my building. And then that led to another instructional coaching position at a different school. And so that was neat because I got to see a different climate, a different culture, different strategies. Every school does things differently. So I was able to bring some things that worked from my previous experiences to that, school facility. And then my husband and I were moving around a little bit. And I think this was after 7 or 8 years I had been, working kind of in the classroom and in this coaching position. And when we moved, I was like, I want to go back into the classroom because I feel like at this point I have learned so much being out of the classroom of what effective teaching looks like that I want to really I wanted to be the best. I was like, I want to just go back in the classroom and, become a rock star. So I went back into the classroom for a couple years in fourth grade. And that is ultimately when I think about my identity as a teacher, it is as a fourth grade teacher. That is the grade that always really resonated with me. And so I went back into the classroom for a while, but when I did this, I sort of missed this opportunity to have a larger impact on, students and teachers outside of just my classroom. So that's when I started my Teachers Pay Teachers store when I was teaching fourth grade. And it was really very much a side hustle, a hobby. I had a friend that also was a fourth grade teacher and she started her TPT store at the same time. So it's something we kind of did together. And then after a couple years teaching fourth grade, I had the opportunity to become the assistant principal of the school that I was working at. And I loved that school. And so again, that sort of seemed like the natural fit for me. And so I took that leap, became the assistant principal, and I did that for 3 years. And that position really sort of led me to the turning point in my career, which was when my principal approached me and he said, I am going to retire in a couple of years and I want you to take over the school. Like, I want you to become the principal. And I sort of had this moment of like, is that what I want for myself, right? Do I want to be a principal? And, I really thought about it and I was like, the sort of further you get up in school leadership, the further you are removed from teachers and students, and you get so much more involved in district politics and testing and all of that type of stuff. And I was like, I still want to be involved in making a difference in like the classroom specifically. And so I was talking about it with my husband and he's like, if you don't want to be a principal, he's like, why don't you leave and do like your TPT store full time? He's like, you're currently doing sort of a part-time gig with that. And what would happen if you made that your full-time thing? So that after sort of that conversation came up, I talked with my principal and I was like, you know what, I have loved working for you and with you, but I don't think I want to be a principal. So at the end of this year, I'm going to be resigning. And then in 2019, or I think it was actually 2018 is when I left the school. And then I've been doing Stellar Teacher ever since.
Wow. I love that story and kudos to you. I'm sure your school missed you.
It was hard to leave. It was really hard to leave.
And you're touching so many teachers' lives now with what you do. And I feel like I have a lot to unpack just from this introduction of yourself. First, for the listeners who have been around here a while, a lot of them know my story too, Sarah. And I came from a history of teachers. Both of my parents were teachers. So I always say like it just runs in the family. So I always love finding other folks. I knew early on that I wasn't meant to be a teacher, which is why I went into ed tech right after college, but that's a whole other story. And my dad was one of those teachers that you talked about. He was in the same classroom, the same school, the same building, literally for 30 years. He retired in this. I'm like, how could you go into the same classroom every day, Dad? But
that's amazing.
He loved it.
I have so much respect. Like, I have so much respect for teachers that is sort of their reality, right? The people that can do that. I was like, I just know that was not for me, but I'm always impressed when I hear people who are like, yep, I've taught 30 years in third grade or, 30 years in whatever at the same school. I was like, that's impressive. That's not for me, but that is impressive.
And one thing when we work with teachers at the Teacher Career Transition Academy, like there is not one path. Like teaching, people are like, oh, all teachers are the same. Like there are so many different paths and different ways that people approach teaching and what it means to them. And I mean, there's so many nuances just in teaching that it's okay if you love being in the same classroom for 30. My dad loved it. That would have driven me crazy. Yeah. But anyway, okay. So TPT, I'm glad that came up. I've always had a lot of questions about it. I've never sold on TPT myself. And we get a lot of TPT questions in our Facebook group, Life After Teaching. And I hear so many different things about selling on there. I love that it was kind of like your first dip. Like you didn't jump into entrepreneurship without testing the water. So it sounds like TPT was kind of like your testing ground. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you started selling on TPT, like how much you were selling, like could you survive on that? Just let's unpack TPT for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm always so grateful for the Teachers Pay Teachers platform because it taught me just a lot about how to run a business. And I sometimes think, I have friends that started their businesses without TPT and I'm like, you are so much braver than I am. Like, I don't know if I could just go in and do it myself. And so I'm always grateful for that. But when I started, I was creating a lot of materials that I was either using with my students or things that I wanted to use. It's like, I always had limitations with curriculum and stuff like that. But I'm like, oh, this would be really great in a fourth grade classroom. I can't use it, but I'll make it. Somebody else can. And I started selling it was actually 10 years ago, the summer of 2015. And I, again, just started making kind of some random things. And I feel like I joined TPT sort of at there were some early days where if you joined like in 2009 or 2011, like your store took off right away. I was not in that generation of TPT sellers, but I got in at a relatively good time to where it was still easy to generate revenue. And within a couple months, I was making a couple $100s a month. So obviously not anything that was replacing my teacher salary. But I was like, okay, this is like, paying for our cable bill and like dinner and groceries. And like, this is substantial. And then I started to really pay attention to what were the things that were selling in my store. And I remember listening to a podcast of somebody, because back then I was all about consuming any free content. So I found a lot of podcasts about Pinterest and blogging, and even there were some TPT specific podcasts. And somebody said, when you're trying to grow your business, success leaves clues, right? And I sort of, that just really like stuck with me, this idea that success leaves clues. So I started to look at what was doing well in my TPT store, and I was like, okay, how can I make more of that? And I always think it's funny because the thing that really sort of like took off in my store were these like anchor charts that I made. And so I had anchor charts for reading, and then I was like, okay, well, let me make anchor charts for writing, and then let me make anchor charts for grammar, and anchor charts for, vocabulary, and anchor charts for math. I just made anchor charts for everything. And then I sold those all together in a larger bundle. So then I'm starting to, not just make $3 a purchase, but a little bit more. And within a couple of months, I got lucky. I had a couple pins on Pinterest that went viral, that led to my store. But within, I think my first year in Teachers Pay Teachers, I made $10,000. So obviously not replacing my teacher salary, but within probably 2 to 3 years, I was at the point to where I was making as much as my teacher salary throughout the course of the year. So I was very fortunate that when I did step away from my assistant principal career, I already had that salary sort of replaced with my Teachers Pay Teachers income. So it wasn't as scary of a leap from a financial perspective. Yeah, so my TPT store felt like it grow relatively quickly. And then, of course, it was one of those things that when I had more time to put into it, it continued to grow. But Teachers Pay Teachers is so interesting because it is so hit or miss. Like I would create some resources that I was like, this is amazing. This is going to be like the bestseller. And it would be like crickets, and like nobody would buy it. And then it's like I would create something and I was like, this is just like okay. And then it would completely take off. So sometimes it's hit or miss, just as far as what people are willing to purchase or want to purchase. But I was, like I said, TPT was very integral to my journey as an entrepreneur. So I'm really happy that I had that ability to sort of jump in with that marketplace before going out completely on my own.
And I know with all technologies and all trends, sometimes things are performed differently in different climates. So like it's 2025 now.
Yeah.
Would you have started on TPT? Like if you're telling your best friend how to get started with something, would you recommend starting at TPT?
I probably wouldn't, because I have so much more business knowledge now that if I had a friend that came to me and she's like, I want to start a business, I could give her so many more like tools and strategies as far as like how to get started. And, again, I know Teachers Pay Teachers has gone through, right? Like that was 2015. We had COVID where there was all of the digital things, and now we're like 2025 and AI is a thing that is competing with, resource creation. I know there's a lot of school districts that it's TPT's hot or cold, right? Like there's some districts where it's like you can't buy anything from TPT. So it definitely has changed over the years. That's a really good question. I don't know if I would still start on it. I mean, it's hard for me to say that because I think if I was just starting, I wouldn't necessarily know any other way. But like you said, if a friend came to me and was like, I want to get started with a business, I would not probably direct them towards TPT. I would give them sort of other steps to take.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. And I don't like to sugarcoat anything over here. I like to, shed light on realities. And everyone's story is different, and timing really matters, especially not just for entrepreneurship, but obviously, Sarah, we talk a lot about changing into other careers, and the timing of the market, employment markets change too. So these are all things that are important to shed light on. So tell us a little bit about Stellar Teacher Company. So far, we know that it's classroom resources that you make. I'm sure there's some anchor charts in there, but tell us the breadth of what you do.
Yeah, so the Stellar Teacher Company, it has morphed. Again, we've just celebrated 10 years and it has completely morphed over time. So ultimately, at the core, we are a curriculum company where we create literacy materials for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers. At this point, we have basically a full curriculum for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade that we sell directly to individual teachers, but we also work with private and charter schools, a lot of schools that don't necessarily have the funds to purchase those big box curriculum companies. But one of the things that I have always felt really passionate about, and this is sort of the thing that nudged me away from just focusing on Teachers Pay Teachers, is that I have always wanted to give teachers the support in implementing the resources, right? Like a PDF alone is not going to teach a kid how to read. It is the teacher behind the resource that is doing that. And a lot of times teachers purchase resources from Teachers Pay Teachers, or they're given resources from their district. And they're like, I don't know how to use this, right? So I'm not going to, it's going to sit in a box. It's going to, sit on my desktop and I'm never going to use it. So I've always really wanted to provide the support to go along with the resources. So in addition to creating resources, we also do a lot of professional development. I try to make that sort of free for teachers. That's kind of our way of giving back to the community. So I have a podcast where I do, podcast episodes every week that are really teaching about best practices. We have a YouTube channel where there's, professional development videos. We have a membership community where we really sell our curriculum. And then there's a lot of professional development videos in there as well. But then we're also able to, when teachers are part of this community, we're able to respond to their questions and, give them support as they're implementing the resources. So like I said, we are ultimately a curriculum company, but, we not only create the resources, we provide the support that helps teachers implement them.
I love that. And one thing I wanted to call out for our audience is, Sara has built her business for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade literacy. There is a lot more out there in education. And I always like to say, niche down on what you are passionate about and what you love. And it's so funny, Sara, I wrote something down that you said that I've literally lived my whole life is success leaves clues. Yes. I never said it that way, but I was thinking that when you were telling your story, I'm like, oh yeah, that led to her assistant principal. That led to this, and that has always been in my life too. And that's actually how the Teacher Career Transition Academy started. I never thought I would go out and be a career coach and do all this, but it was oh, here's a door. I love this. Let me walk through this door. Oh, I love doing this. People are asking me these questions and I can help them. The clues are there if you listen, but you also have to be brave and take a leap.
Well, and to your point, something that you said about niching down, I think it is also, I always tell teachers, I have a team of people that work with me. So I've done a lot of hiring over the years. And anytime I'm interviewing, I love to encourage the teachers because obviously I can't hire everybody, but I love to sort of just encourage them to remind them that this is such a cool time to be in education. Because if you want to be involved in education, but you don't want to be a classroom teacher, there are so many opportunities for you out there. And I went the path of creating curriculum, but I have people that work for me that I have a podcast manager, right, who edits my podcast, right? And she edits education podcasts, or you could be a video editor that edits education video things. You could be a Pinterest manager that does social media management for people in the education space. So you don't even have to necessarily be willing to create curriculum or do professional development. There are so many education adjacent roles that support education. And I just think it's so neat. It's all of these things. I was none of this stuff existed when I first started teaching. And so it's just so cool, the opportunities that do exist for teachers.
And how many transferable skills that teachers have that apply in all of these other jobs. Hey teachers, quick break in the podcast because I have something truly special for you. The Teacher Career Transition Summit is a free virtual event packed with expert advice, real success stories, and step-by-step guidance to help you explore new careers and land a job you love. It's happening on Saturday, June 14th. So if you're hearing this before then, go grab your free ticket. And if it's already passed, no worries. You can access the full replays or join a waitlist for the next one. Head on over to our website, teachercareertransitionacademy.com/summit to check out what's available now. And back to the podcast. Okay, so obviously the transferable skill of creating curriculum and having that creative eye. Is there any other teacher skill that you had that you're using in a new way as an entrepreneur or business owner or hiring manager?
I think the ability to pivot. If you think about a teacher, it's every day they're having to be okay, well, that didn't go how I thought, so let me pivot, let me adjust. I think being able to react in real time. Again, it's just if you think about all the things that are thrown at a teacher, it's very similar as an entrepreneur. It's the days, the weeks, the months never go necessarily how I plan. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse, sometimes we get more done, sometimes we don't. But I think just sort of having that flexibility and that mindset to be able to pivot. I definitely think having a lot of the skills that I learned as an assistant principal, obviously, I'm managing a team of people now. And I think had I not been an assistant principal and had that managerial experience, I think I would be struggling to, lead my team in an effective way. So I was grateful to have that management experience. I think communication skills, teachers, I think in general are really good communicators. They're teaching all day, so they're communicating content to their students, but they also have to communicate with parents. They have to communicate with their, school leaders. And so I think in general, just like, not being afraid to necessarily have those either tough conversations or to be really clear and direct. So yeah, I definitely think the communication skills help as well. But I don't know, there's a lot of similarities, I think, between teaching and entrepreneurship. They're both really tough. They're both really scary. They're both really rewarding and fulfilling.
I feel like I'm going to have to bring you back on another podcast or another panel and just get your take on like hiring teachers, because I know you're now doing that too. And I'd love to pick your brain on that. But I do like to somewhat stay on topic in the episodes. Okay, so being on TPT, and then when now you just said like you have teams, you have systems in place, like what? Can you talk about that slice between being a TPT company and then getting let's call it version 2.0 off the ground? Like, did you have a mentor? Like, how did you know how to do it? Like, let's talk about that in between. How did you do it?
There was a lot of different in between steps, right? If I think about like my business, there was a lot of different iterations, because when I quit my assistant principal gig and was doing TPT, or, and that's really what it was at the time. I only had my TPT store. When I left teaching, I didn't even have a blog. I didn't have social media. Like, it was just my TPT store. And now all of a sudden I'm like, I got 40 hours a week. Like, sure, I'll just continue to make resources. And a couple things sort of happened, when you sell on a third-party marketplace, right? And all TPT sellers, we are at the mercy of how TPT chooses to run their business. And they are a business with their own business goals and their own priorities. And they don't necessarily, they're a great organization. They do care about the sellers, but their goals are not always aligned with the individual seller goals. And a couple things were happening to where I kind of started to realize, I was like, wait a minute, if I want to do this for the long haul, I can't have all of my business eggs in the TPT basket, right? Like, my business cannot just be a TPT store, because there's so many things that I cannot control with that. So I started to think about what could I do that is sort of outside of just TPT. And I was a part of a peer mastermind, which I had a group of friends that I connected with in Facebook groups and forums that also had TPT stores. And this is sort of we were all at similar places, and there was, sort of having these conversations about how can we continue to grow our businesses. And I had a friend in that group who was getting ready to launch a membership site. And she was like, you should just launch a membership site. And I was like, okay, I don't know what a membership is, but like, cool. Like, if that's something off of TPT, like, surely I can figure it out. So I made the decision that I was going to, start to diversify. So I was like, I'm going to make a membership, which, basically what I did to get started was I took my TPT resources, put them on an external platform, and people, it's kind of like Netflix, right? People paid monthly fee to get an access to all of my resources. So it started with that. And then over time, the membership even grew and morphed, because as I had more members join, they would ask, do you have resources for this? Do you have this for this grade level? And it allowed us then to get this vision, which is ultimately the thing that led to us creating our full curriculum. So that sort of, that point was kind of when I had that first iteration of, okay, I don't want to rely just on this third-party marketplace for the success of my business. I need to take some things into my own hands. So that's when I started my membership. So then that kind of led into, I had this membership, and at some point I started a blog and a social media and all of that. And then all of a sudden I realized, I was like, I have way too many things going on for me to do by myself. So then I think it was really around 2021 or 2022. I was like, I need to start hiring some people, right? I need to have some additional support. So I started really small with like, let me hire a social media person for 5 hours a week to manage my Instagram. Let me hire a curriculum contractor to help create answer keys and some of those small things. And all of those hires all started off very small. And then over time, it gave me a lot more confidence in my ability to figure out how to hire people, how to onboard people, how to manage them, how to have them help out with the business. So now I have a team where I have 6 employees. I've got one person that works full time for me in our curriculum department. which is great because, again, going back to this whole impact thing, the fact that I now have 6 people that work just for the Stellar Teacher Company in a variety of roles, it allows us to have a much bigger impact than if it was still just me working by myself. But with all of these things, right, when I launched my membership site, like that was terrifying. When I made my first hire, like that was terrifying. There's all these things when I launched my podcast, all these things, they're so scary, but it's just like, they're all just different iterations along the way.
I love that. And I'm going to go back to the mastermind for a second, because that's something that I've just in my own personal life have just seen how important it is to surround yourself with other people that are going through wherever you are in your journey, especially if you're trying to make a big change. And that was something that was important for me to bring into the Teacher Career Transition Academy too, is just, if a teacher is going through such a huge career change, like you have to be surrounded by other people that are going through that too. And, for the most part, like you can't just go into school and tell your peers that you want to leave. So like they're really, you have to really have like a secure group of people that you trust to support you. And I'm so glad that you had your mastermind. And it sounds like your husband was so supportive too. If he was the one, he planted the idea in your head
he's given me a lot of nudges over the years.
Yeah. And his blessing. And that's such a blessing to have that in your life. And a supportive partner at home, I'm sure helps. I know it helped me with my big transition.
For sure. I was going to say, to your point though, Lisa, it's like if you look at because I've done, peer masterminds that were sort of free and like, self-organized. And I've also done a lot of paid coaching over the years, where I've paid to be a part of a group with a coach that's giving advice and input. And if you really look at look back at the 10 years of my business, anytime I've made a big leap or made a big jump or a big adjustment, I've been surrounded by a group of people that have been able to give input and advice and support and encouragement. And so I always sort of, it's like when I'm feeling kind of like stale in my business or kind of like, okay, I don't know what goes next. It's like, all right, I need to get into either like, I need to find a new coaching group or a new whatever. Like I need to find a group of people to help support through the next transition because like figuring all this out on your own is hard. Making transitions is hard. And so when you have a group of people, it just creates more support, accountability, gives you knowledge. So definitely that support has been integral just throughout my business.
One thing that a lot of teachers that I work with go through is what we call imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes.
And I'm looking at you and I wish you look so confident. You're smiling, like you know what you're talking about. You're 10 years in now, but I'm guessing there was a different Sarah about 9.5 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like 10 years in, I'm finally, at least I know what imposter syndrome sounds like for me, right? And I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to ignore that. I've done this enough times. But there was so much fear and anxiety. I mean, I think when I first started my TPT store, I was like, I don't want to tell anybody about this. It's like I started it and I didn't even tell my husband because I was like, I don't want to start something and then not have it be successful. But I remember when I left I didn't tell a lot of people that I had this TPT store. So I think when people found out that I was leaving my assistant principal position, they didn't really understand that I had something else that I had been working on. But I was really nervous about that. And it was not worried. Like my biggest fear was the embarrassment that I would get from friends and family if it didn't work out, right? I was just so worried that I was like, what would other people think of me? What would they say if it's like I left this stable, successful educational career to try something on my own? But I had very similar feelings. It's like, I remember when I launched my podcast, I wanted to start a podcast for a long time. And I remember, I think it was back in 2019, my husband ordered me a podcast microphone. And he's like, you should start a podcast. He's like, you keep talking about it, like just do it. And I did not start my podcast. I think it was 2022 is when I finally started it. And I remember like just worried, like, what if I start it and what if nobody listens to it? And what if nobody, tunes in? What if it's a failure? Same thing when I launched my membership site, all of these sort of fears, like, what if it is not successful? And the thing that I've realized is that, in 10 years in business, I have definitely launched things and tried things and put things out there that are not successful and they don't land. And I am still okay and I still move forward. And so I just don't let the fear, I think, hold me back anymore. The fear used to create a lot longer of a buffer between when I had an idea of something I wanted to do and when I actually took action on it. And the longer I do this, the less it's just like, okay, yeah, I'm worried about this, but I'm going to do it anyways, because the sooner I get started, the sooner I'm going to know if it works or not.
I love that. And I mean, your husband just keeps sounding more and more amazing. He just orders you a podcast.
Great.
I love the story. Okay. And I love that line is don't let, you said, I don't want to let fear hold me back anymore. Yeah. And I mean, I feel that in my bones for me personally, and also pretty much all of the teachers that I work with at the academy. There's just this huge fear of the unknown. What are people going to think? Am I going to be successful? Can I do this? And it's often not until we're on the other side of it where we're realized we could have done it all along.
Yes. Yes.
So
and
kudos to you. I know it's not easy.
That at least was comforting for me, and to some degree still is, because in some cases it's like I've built this business and it is successful, and I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have the creativity and the bandwidth and the skills to have this thing last another 10 years, right? Like education's constantly changing, technology's constantly changing. Like, am I going to be able to have this thing carry on? But something I always go back to is that education is an essential part of our society, right? It will always exist. So there are always going to be jobs in education. So it's like, sure, maybe my business isn't going to be here forever, or maybe I try something new and it doesn't work, but there's always going to be something that I can do in education. Like, it is such a safe profession to be in because it is an essential part of our society. So it's like, even if whatever you're attempting to do does not work out, you'll find something, because education is always going to be here.
And guess what? You're going to get clues as to where your business should be going. As education changes, you'll see those breadcrumbs and those clues, and you will evolve with it.
Well, and the other thing, this, thinking of back to the whole, like, just the fear, right? Having so much fear. I always had this fear, once I got started selling on TPT, and, I was getting consistent, started off as a couple $100s a month, and then a couple $1,000s a month. And then, like I said, at some point it was replacing my teacher salary and all of that. And I had this fear in my head that I was like, okay, what if one day I wake up and it all just stops, right? Like, I'm just not making any money anymore. Or it's like, all of a sudden nobody opens any of my emails, nobody engages, right? It's just like this instant, like, you exist one day and then the next day you don't. And that's really not how businesses operate, right? So if you're worried about any sort of like failure, like that stuff happens gradually over time to where you might not notice. It's like, okay, our enrollment isn't as high as it used to be, or our sales are slightly down, but it happens gradually to where you have then time to be like, okay, I'm noticing some trends. They're not in the direction that I want, but now I can pivot and adjust, right? So any sort of like failure that I think people are worried about usually does not happen instantaneously. It usually happens pretty slowly over time to where you have time to adjust and pivot and, make changes to where you can, change your trajectory of your business to where it is like experiencing success again.
I think that's a really important point to bring up, because I do see that about fear. It's not one day you're not going to wake up one day and it's all gone. You'll notice it. And also, there's nothing wrong with pivoting back into the classroom. I talk to a lot of teachers too, and there's stories of, they tried something else and they realized that wasn't for them either. So they went back in the classroom, sometimes permanently, and sometimes just I'm working with a teacher now. She had to pivot back into the classroom, and her plan is to do that for a year or two as she prepares herself for her next pivot.
Yeah.
Because like you said, education's not going anywhere.
Yep.
You can always go back to teaching.
Always. Yes.
Always. There's a shortage.
Teacher shortages everywhere.
There's a shortage.
So you'll be able to find a job, no problem.
Correct. So it's like, all right, why not? I can always go back. Yeah. Kind of as we wrap up here, and I think I could talk to you for hours, Sarah, but what advice would you give to a teacher who's feeling pulled towards, maybe they want to start something on their own, but they don't know where to begin? It's like that first step is often the hardest.
Yeah.
Any advice in that area?
Yeah, I think it is like, get started as soon as you can, right? Take that first step. You're never going to feel ready. I think so often, and I've talked with a lot of entrepreneurs over the years who wanted to either start a TPT store and they're like, well, as soon as I get 50 products made, then I'll launch my store, or they want to start right? We create these conditions for ourselves that as soon as I've done all of this preparation work, then I'll get started. And the reality of it is you just need to get started. Because once you get started, your next step becomes so much more clear to you. And I think also realizing that more than likely, however you get started is not going to be how you finish or what it looks like in 2 months or 3 months. But again, it's like it's like when I look back over the 10 years, if someone would have told me 10 years ago, like, start the business that you have today, I would have had no idea how to do that, right? Because there's so many things that I have learned along the way. So you don't have to know everything, but you have to get started in order to learn, in order to pivot, in order to adjust, in order to grow. And if you don't know where to get started, then that's where communities like yours are so great and helpful. It's like get plugged into a group of entrepreneurs who are like, coming up with business ideas and just start to hear what other people are doing, what steps they're taking, but take some sort of action. Because I feel like that's one of those things that once you take the first step, the next step becomes easier. The next one after that becomes easier. It really is that first step that is the hardest. So if you have an idea for something, like just take one step to figure that out. And if you don't know what to do, Google has really taught me everything about my business, right? Like go to YouTube and be like, how do I start an email list? Or how do I start a blog? Or how, I have this idea for XYZ. What's my first step? AI and YouTube can help with a lot of things.
And I just see so many parallels. I mean, obviously this chat today on the podcast is teacher to entrepreneur. And Sara, you probably know this, my listeners know, I often do most of our work is teacher into another career.
Yeah.
But I feel like that piece about momentum is the same, because the first step to change careers is scary. The first exploration, it's not even just starting a business, it's just any big change. And we talk about momentum a lot. And I say when people are like, well, what's the difference between like teachers who actually make the jump and ones that don't? And I'm like, honestly, momentum.
Yeah.
Like one step and realizing that the small wins matter, because you do one step, then another and another, and it just unfolds, and you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
The same is true for entrepreneurship, career change. I mean, anything really.
I do. And the other thing that I would say, and I think this is important because I think there is so much mindset work that goes into this, right? There's so many limiting beliefs that we have. And I think in a lot of cases, the things that hold us back is the belief that we have in ourselves that, maybe I can't do this, or maybe I'm not deserving of this, or maybe this is not for me. And so let me give you a reminder, whatever dream you have for whether it's entrepreneurship journey or a separate career, like you can do that. Other people do it all the time. So there's no reason why you can't do it. If you have a dream for something else, like you are deserving of pursuing that. So don't let any like limiting fear that you have get in the way of going after something that you want.
I love that. And we're just syncing up on everything, because when I started the Career Transition Academy, I'm like, the first thing that people are going to do in the academy is go through module 1, which is called mindset. And I'm like, this is so easy. And my members hear me preach about this. I'm like, please don't skip mindset. Everyone wants to. They just want to go. They want to jump ahead.
Yep.
It's like putting in that work to get your mind right, do some mindset, reset, believe in yourself. That will carry through to everything that you do after. So I love that you're preaching this for me, Sara. So thank you for that. Yes. I love those real world stories of why it's important.
Yep.
All right. Any final words for our listeners, or anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
No, thank you so much for having me. I will just say again, it's like being an entrepreneur is so exciting. It's so fun. It is also so challenging. I love encouraging fellow entrepreneurs or people who are getting started. So, if any of your listeners are resonating with anything that I'm sharing and they just have questions, reach out to us on Instagram, go to our website. You can find our email address, send me an email, let me know what you're working on. I'll be happy to give any nuggets of advice I can, or any, little bits of encouragement. Because it is like, I don't know, just a scary thing to step forward. So again, don't be afraid to reach out to myself or other people. I think that's the other thing. It's like, if you see something that other people are doing and it interests you, send them an email, be like, hey, I love what you're doing. Like, can we jump on Zoom for 20 minutes and chat? Can I pick your brain? Whatever it is, like, don't be afraid to make connections, because that goes a long way as well.
And another great segue into all the networking content that we have available for our teachers at the Academy. Well, Sara, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful chat. I'll make sure to drop your website, your Instagram links. And also, if you are a 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade teacher still in the classroom, there might be some amazing resources available for you at the Stellar Teacher Company. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Lisa.
Well, friends, I hope you loved hearing from Sara as much as I did. Her journey is such a powerful reminder that leaving the classroom doesn't mean leaving behind your passion for education. It just means expressing it in a new way. If Sara's story sparked something in you, be sure to check out her work at the Stellar Teacher Company and give her podcast a listen for more tips and inspiration. And if you're a teacher exploring your own entrepreneurial path, stay tuned for more interviews in this special Teacher-Turned-Entrepreneur series. We've got some amazing guests coming up who are proving that teachers make incredible business owners. The classroom may be where your story started, but it's not where it has to end. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel and leave a review. And remember, friends, the journey is just the beginning. Embrace the adventure.